I was a senior in high school with aspirations of playing D1 football as a wide receiver. And I went across the middle and got hit by two guys and I broke my neck.
Oh,
And that was the end of my football career.
yeah.
I didn't need surgery, but I came like millimeters from severing my spinal cord. So it was a big wake up call. And at the time in 1983, when that happened, I was told I can't play any sports ever again.
Hi, Coach Mike Ritchie here from D3 Multisport. On today's podcast, we are chatting with D3 athlete Mike Reed. Mike is a former surfer turned triathlete who has qualified for Ironman Hawaii multiple times. Mike is fresh off winning his age group at Ironman Maryland and then coming back to run the New York City Marathon only a few weeks later. Mike's a great example of someone who has worked hard over several years and continues to see results even into his 50s. Hope you enjoyed this episode with Mike Reed. Hi, Coach Mike Ritchie here with the D3 Triathlon podcast with Mike Reed from Florida. Mike has been a long time D3 athlete, and so happy to have him on here. He's such a busy guy with so much going on. Just finished New York City Marathon, which was on the heels of Ironman Maryland, and This guy doesn't stop. So glad to have you on, Mike. How's your day going?
Hey, Mike, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you, always. And my day's going great. Everything's good. I'm starting to, I feel about 80% recovered from New York City. So, and I've got Ironman Florida 70.3 in 3 weeks. So I'm ready to go.
Awesome. That's great. So let's go back a little bit. Like even before triathlon, you've been a lifelong athlete, right?
Yeah.
And did it start with surfing or swimming? I know you're a big surfer.
Yeah, so I started with skateboarding.
Wow, right.
Right. I did a lot of skateboarding, and then and my father wanted me to play football, so I played football. So it was sort of half for my dad and half for myself. And I really did well playing football, and I was a senior in high school with aspirations of playing D1 football as a wide receiver. And I went across the middle and got hit by two guys and I broke my neck. And that was the end of my football career.
Yeah.
I didn't need surgery, but I came like millimeters from severing my spinal cord. So it was a big wake up call. And at the time in 1983, when that happened, I was told I can't play any sports ever again. And so I thought skateboarding was over. I thought everything was over. He was wrong. But that experience helped to inspire me to go into physical therapy, a field of physical therapy. I actually was going to go to medical school and become a spine surgeon, but I really became very enamored because I was always an athlete and I liked the physical training aspect of it. So I ended up pursuing a degree in physical therapy, ended up getting an operational management doctorate in the field. And in that experience, realized that I was probably misguided with respect to what I could and could not do. And so in college, I got back into running, and then I moved to South Florida. I had done a internship in Perth, Australia, and thought maybe I head out there, but headed to South Florida because Australia required you to work for 2 years in the field before you accept a position out in that country. So I moved to South Florida and took up surfing. And like everything I do, I was like 100% into it, and then continuing to work on my career. And I fully expected to go to medical school. But I ended up loving South Florida. I met my wife. We're going to celebrate 30 years next year, and I never left. And so I've been down here in Florida for 30 years. And at that time, just got really into surfing and skateboarding. And I was biking and running. And but I was traveling all over the world surfing, surfing big waves, whatever I could do. And yeah, that was my history. But as I said, when there weren't waves, I was biking and running. And so triathlon kind of made sense.
Yeah. So what year did you do your first race?
I did my first race in 1994.
Wow.
I did my first race.
29 years ago, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
On.
And that was just a sprint and for fun. Right. And, it was just kind of a local thing. It's big down here in South Florida. So that's what I did. And then, but everything for me then was just about surfing. So it was really just for fun.
So do you still surf a bit?
I do. I still surf a little bit, but no, it's all about it's all about endurance racing now. It's completely shifted. So yeah,
Right, right. When I
yeah,
met you, I mean, it must have been, I don't even know at this point, 2008 or 2009, maybe.
yeah,
Your boys were young. I mean, they
yeah,
were, I don't even know if they were
yeah,
12 and 10 at the time, maybe,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
well, Mike, you played a huge role in, and I know you don't realize this, but I want to give you big props. So I started getting into racing because when my oldest boy turned 10, despite us introducing him to organized sports, he really just wanted to surf, swim, bike, and run. And
Cool.
he wanted to get into triathlon. And I said, this is something I can actually do with you. So that'd be kind of cool. And me, I just wanted to really get after it. And so I bought one of your programs
Uh-huh.
online because I wanted to do an Olympic distance race. And it was awesome having um, that whole plan played out. And I think I probably was one of the early adopters of Training Peaks. And I just kept on reading these articles about Mike Ricci, and then, University of Colorado Buffaloes, and you were a coach there. And I
Yeah.
just, and so I never worry about taking chances. So I emailed you. And I said, "Hey, I want to do more of this stuff." And you said, "Well, geez, we've got a company and we train athletes. Would you like to be involved?" And I was in. And so
Awesome.
you helped me become um, way more than I thought I could achieve in this sport. And then my kids were so inspired. They've done your programs for
That's
certain
great.
races. So it's very
That's
cool.
great.
It's very cool.
That's great. And then you started working with Dave in somewhere around 2012 or so,
Yep, that's
right? So
exactly
it's
the
been
year,
10, 11 years.
2012.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So I think you realized that I was a little bit nuts. And you also realized that I had some things going on in my life that were very similar to Dave. I mean, that was so brilliant of you to make the connection between. I mean, and this is something that you've always preached. It's not just about the training, it's about what your life experience is.
Yeah.
And Dave Sheenan and I, same age, kids are similar in
Similar
age.
ages. Yeah.
We're both married. We both serve in very, very similar roles. He's chief of staff and chief operating officer of a company. I'm chief of staff, chief strategic officer of a company. We just have very similar things. So he was the perfect match for me because he understood what was going on outside of my training. And I think it just was a recipe for success. We've been working since 2012 and it's been awesome.
That's great. It's funny. I always people will call me looking for a coach or something, and they'll say, "Do I get to pick them?" And I said, "Well, no, I pick them because I'm the matchmaker here, right? Like I know I can get a sense of people in the 10 to 15 minutes I talk to them. I know the coaches really well, who they're going to work with. I know that better probably. If someone's super technical, I know which coach. If they have a swimming deficiency, I know who they're going to connect them with. If
Yeah.
it's a running issue, or if it's someone who just needs a lot of hand holding, I know which coach to give them to say this
Right.
person has a lot of empathy and this is the coach that's going to work well with you.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit, I always say I don't have 100% batting average, but I'm like 98, 99% pretty good that most of the relationships we have are, in that decade plus, thing. And I'm glad I was able to do that because that was early on for sure. But you've had so much success and I will say this, I think starting out, you definitely showed signs of, big things ahead, but it took a little while to get there. Do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, I was a little cautious, right, because of my previous injuries, and
Yep.
I because of the field I was working in at the time, which was medicine. I really had a very um, strong understanding of adaptation, physiological adaptation, and I realized that if I went from A to Z too quickly, I could get hurt. I could burn out. There are a lot of
Yep.
things that could happen. So I was one of those people that just very methodically, raced a sprint distance, couple of those, worked Olympic. Um, I actually, that was one of the first experiences with you was doing an Olympic race. I actually did it at the time when Chris McCormick was very famous, and I
Yeah.
attended his camp in Miami. And then um, we did the international distance race there with him. And boy, I tell you, I learned some lessons there. I went out hard on the bike. I think I was averaging like I was 25, 26 miles an hour, and I couldn't run. I just cramped up, and I just started to learn that it's not individual sports, it's one sport, and you need to think about it all the way through. And so, so I just kind of was very careful. I did my first half Ironman in 2015. That was in Miami. And just continued to work my way up. And so to this point, I've done, I've entered 16 half Ironmans. I've finished 15. I had a terrible crash in one of them. And then I've done 7 full Ironmans and qualified for Kona 3 times. And, but I'll race for the first time in Kona. Hopefully it all works out in 2024.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. So, you didn't get to go last time because is it because they moved it or because something else happened?
So I qualified in Tulsa at that race, and then we had COVID, and so that caused the cancellation. And then I was to race in 2022 when they had the men's and women's race on 2 days. And I was in getting ready for that year, which was 2022. I raced in Panama City, Florida, Gulf Coast Ironman 70.3. And unfortunately, mile 53, I was coming down the beach road towards transition, fully tucked at about 26 miles an hour. I was just behind the lead pack. So we had a big lead pack, and then I had some distance between me and them, about 200 yards. And unfortunately, this ATV hauling a jet ski decided to try to make it across the road, and I didn't see him, and I hit him at 26 miles an hour and dislocated and broke 5 ribs. And, that was the end of my day. And because of that, it was scary. And then there was just no way I could get ready for Kona. And Ironman rarely does this, but they said, listen, we're going to defer you to next year. And then, of course, the race was moved to Nice, and I had a choice. And I said, well, I want the Kona experience. So 2024, cross my fingers, is my year.
Awesome. So let me ask you a question. What was your first half Ironman time compared to where you brought it down? Because now you're on the podium. I mean, it's pretty consistent for you.
Yeah. So my first half Ironman race was 5:07. I've now seen, I've done a couple of the challenge races, which may not be exactly, a half distance, but I've had a 4:36. I've had in a full Ironman a sub 4:45. Wow. So that's been great. And then full Ironman, I started off, my first race was Ironman Florida 2016, and I hit a 10:32 there. And my lowest has been actually not far off of that, 10:29. Well, then came Ironman Maryland, where it all changed.
Yeah, but if you think about that, right? Like even if you are, so how old were you in 2016? You were 52
I was
or something?
50. I was we're on 50. I'm 57 now. So 2000. Yeah, so I was 50.
50, and you're keeping the same speed as you age. What does that say? Really, that means you're getting faster, right? It's hard to comprehend it because the numbers aren't showing up, but it. I mean, you know how you feel, right?
Yep.
And you feel great every day, probably. So let's talk about a little bit about Maryland. But first, was there any difference? And that was a breakthrough race for you. Was there any difference for you in the build up to that race versus the other race, or has everything been pretty consistent?
I think that experiences like I had in that crash, and then subsequent to that, 6 months later, getting ready for Ironman Florida, because I decided to enter that, I had another crash and broke my collarbone. And I think what that did was it made me sort of reevaluate what's important in my life and really what I wanted to achieve. And I put less racing on the calendar. I used to race like every month, right? It just had to, I had to have something on the schedule.
Sure.
And I stopped doing that. Dave and I talked a lot. He has been phenomenal in helping me through some tough times. And, we just decided, listen, let's not be so busy with racing. Let's focus on some really important races and take the time to train and recover and, nibble at the margins. And I think that made all the difference. Of course, you run the risk when you don't have as many races, you run the risk of like if you're sick or something and then you lose out.
For sure.
But that made all the difference, was being able to just take my time and really not be. We sometimes think that the racing is helpful to the big A races, like the C races and the B races, and I think sometimes they can take away from the buildup.
That's a great point. So, as an experienced racer, I would say that racing all the time is detrimental almost, right?
Yep, I agree.
When I get new people or people new to the sport and, they're like, oh, I'm doing a 70.3 and then I got my Ironman. I'm like, you need more experience. You need more time in transition, more time in those swim waves with the groups of people, drafting. And, one of the things I have to get across to my athletes is when you see those draft packs, don't let that charge you up mentally. Like, just know those people are doing their thing and that's fine. They can cheat and they can draft, but you need to keep your distance. If you can, you can draft legally and get a benefit from it. Sure. But if you want to back off, like you probably were at that race you're talking about at Gulf Coast, back off and just ride your race and keep your distance, that's fine too. But don't let it affect you, right? Because that just draws energy from you and you get to the run and you're so amped and mad and adrenalized that only lasts 5 miles. I mean, you still got 8 miles to go. Okay. So that sounds like a change in a little bit of coaching strategy going into Maryland. And then tell me about the day and how it went. 'Cause I mean, it just seemed like it all clicked.
Yeah. So, it was pretty extraordinary, for me. Dave and I were really looking forward to it. And I went up early. Actually, Chelsea had some things that she had to handle here in the city. And then I picked her up from the airport the day before and she was able to be with me for the race, which was great. And so race morning, there were some pretty profound moments. Of course, the swim was cut a little bit shorter because of some really rough currents. The kayaks couldn't stay upright, but they did allow us to do the swim. It was shortened, but that was great. I wanted that. So I remember standing there with Chelsea, and of course there was a pro field, both men's and women's. So yeah, the vibe was pretty great. And I remember standing there and saying, because I was already qualified for Kona, I already had my Kona slot, and I just was standing there doing a little warm up and looking at everybody, and I said to her, "Geez, 90% of these people are just here to do the race and have fun." And I'm sitting here and all I want to do is, like my mind is saying, race, go as fast as I can. I want to get on that podium. And I just don't know if I want that stress anymore. I said that to her. I said, I just don't know if I really, it's just pressure. And she looked at me and she said, "Shut up. You're going to go race. You'll hit that water and you're just going to race. So just shut up and go race as fast as you can." I'm like, okay.
So let me stop you right there. So I see two things right there. First of all, the raw emotion of being on the beach and getting ready to race, right? All that stuff's bubbling to the top.
Yeah.
Maybe it's insecurity. Maybe it's just truth, right? Truth doesn't, you're ready to, and then here's someone who knows you better than you know yourself saying, "Dude, just shut up and get in there and go. This is your thing. Right. This is your day. Go get it." Right.
Yep.
And that's all the inspiration you need. Like, I'm almost welling up. I mean, that's phenomenal.
That's exactly what happened. And I was actually, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I was actually emotional.
Yeah.
And,
of course.
And she was like, get a hold of yourself. And so, I lined up to get in the water, and she was probably more excited and more engaged in the whole thing than I was. And she was right there when I was just about to go in the water. I blew her a kiss, and boom, I was in, and it was on. And I just remember just saying, "You know what? I love this," and just went at it. And it just was one of those perfect days. I kind of knew on the bike, it was a 2-loop bike. And I knew at the time I looked at my, I don't monitor my speed. It's on my second screen on my Garmin. What I monitor is I monitor my normalized power because I know where I want to be. Right. And I looked at and I really felt I was holding a good aero position the whole time. And I ended up peaking at my speed halfway through, and I was averaging like 22.5 miles an hour for the race. And I'm like, okay, this is on. Um, and so I didn't know where I was though. And you don't know where you were or where you are. So I came off the bike and, of course I saw Chelsea literally 100 yards out of the tent. And I started running. And you're not supposed to give your athletes splits, and she's good. She's careful, but she kind of runs beside me. She says, "You're in the lead." I said, "Oh, excellent, let's go." So and that's kind of how it played out. And in Maryland, it's a 3.5 loops on the run. I got to see her quite a bit, and there was one guy that was chasing me. And she would tell me, I'd come past her and she'd say, "You need to speed up." And I'd look at her and go, "What?" I'm running, I'm in an Ironman. How can I speed up? She said, "No, you might want to speed up a little bit." So anyway, it was just a special day. And I didn't, I never, I don't think I would have allowed myself to imagine years ago that I could ever win an Ironman race. And I was coming down, I was at mile 24, and I think the guy who was chasing me, a couple of his buddies were in the crowd, and I didn't realize it. And one of them pointed at me as I was coming around a corner, and I kind of just figured, I think he knows the guy that I'm like competing against, because he came in second place 16 minutes behind me, and then the third place was 45 minutes behind me. So he looks at me with 2.5 miles to go, and he says, "You did it. You won." He said, "Good race." He said, "You got this done." And I realized, okay, this is actually happening. And so that last 2 miles was just so much fun, and came across the finish line, and you can hear Chelsea on the video screaming at me. So it was great.
That's incredible, Mike. That's congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So what did the recovery look like? Because now you got your eyes set on New York City Marathon. I mean, you don't stop. So
right.
What happens then? Is it just a lot of rest the next couple of weeks? I mean, you still probably had to get a couple runs in, get the build back on, and get ready to race, right? Mentally, obviously, kind of decompress a little bit. And it's a big high to come off of.
Yeah. So, I always believe one of the things that I've learned over the years is that you need to stop and smell the roses, right? You need to celebrate that, and be careful not to get too far ahead of yourself, because you miss the moment. So I came across the finish line, and literally 5 minutes after I finished across the finish line, I took Chelsea's cell phone and I called Dave Sheenan. And I said, "Dave, we did it." And he was so excited. We both were so excited. And then he said, "Okay," he said, "I need you to recover. You need a week. Just take it easy, follow my plan, and then we'll get ready for New York City Marathon." I said, I'm on it 100%. And so, so it was a typical recovery week, very light stuff, nothing intense at all. And New York City Marathon. So I've done Boston 3 times. I've done Chicago. I think I've run now like 20 marathons, but New York City's special, and I didn't want to screw it up. I didn't want to get hurt. And this is when you can get hurt right after an Ironman. You can get hurt easily, pull a muscle, whatever. I've been through that. And so I really was so careful not to do anything more than what he prescribed. And we just slowly built up. And then about a week and a half before the marathon, we did a couple of good long runs at a good pace. And I think the biggest difference, the thing that was the hardest for me in getting ready for New York was, it's, people don't realize when you run a marathon, just a marathon, it's so different than doing an Ironman. The marathon and the Ironman is a very different experience than a marathon, just the marathon. And I knew that I wanted to run about a 3:15, 3:20 marathon. And so you had to get your speed. And that was the hardest part, was getting my speed back.
Yeah. Was that more rest, or was that actually trying to get some speed work in?
It was a combination of rest, lots of nutrition, and then, just having a couple of sessions where he pushed me. We did a couple of 20-minute blocks over, hour and a half, 2-hour sessions at, like a 7. Actually, we did a 6:50 pace, a couple of them, just to really get my speed back.
30 seconds faster than race pace, maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
And then
that was hard.
For comparison, what did you run the Ironman marathon in?
I ran the Ironman marathon in a 3:38, so about an 8:21 pace. I did have a cramp a mile mile 20, I had a side stitch.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've learned not to run through those things, manage the moment. So I stopped, managed it, and it was great because 2 minutes later I was back on my pace. So I
Beautiful.
ran an 8:21 pace in Maryland, and then New York City Marathon was a 7:31 pace.
Beautiful. And, I watched you the whole way out of New York City. I was watching the whole day. We had some athletes and I'm checking in here and there. You were super consistent with, by 5Ks. I mean, it was on.
Yeah.
Not a lot of disparity at all. I mean, it was great. Do you, did it feel like it was pretty mechanical, or did you feel like a lot of work? I mean, the crowds are huge, a lot of energy there. Or
Yeah.
did you feel like you had to work for it? Or is it just the last 10K? Like, take me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So, New York City Marathon, as you know, you start at the Verrazano Bridge, so you go up a mile and then you
Yeah.
go down a mile, and it's, that's not easy. I think it was not easy. I mean, I was definitely pushing a little bit, but I felt like I could have gone faster. But I had slotted myself. I told Dave, I said, I think I'm going to do a 3:20 because I've got Ironman Florida 70.3 December 10th, and I just don't want to blow myself out. And he said, just, see how you feel. And if you want to go for it, you go for it. But you really can't in New York City, because if you slot yourself for a certain time and you decide, okay, well, I'm feeling good, I'm going to go faster, you've got millions of people you got to try to run around.
It's a wall of people, right? You can't get through them.
Yeah. So I picked my lanes, made up time where I could. Ended up running just a little bit more 3:16 high, and it was a good day. So, but it was definitely, I still felt a little bit of Maryland in those legs.
I'm sure. So now you've got a 70.3, and how many more weeks? 3 weeks? 4 weeks?
Yeah, 3 weeks. Yep.
3 weeks. All right.
Yeah.
So legs recovered?
No. No, they're about 80%. I went for my first run yesterday. Dave has me run on Thursday after like a Sunday race, and I just ran 20 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm at mile 24 of the marathon. They were really sore. Yeah, but I think I'll be ready. I'm looking forward to it. I want to get my all world gold status back, because I lost it when I was injured because I couldn't race, and they just won't, if you don't race, you don't get the status. So I'd like to get that back so I can go into Kona with it.
Beautiful. Well, we wish you luck in Kona. I mean, that's going to be a great event, and hopefully we can make it out there and see you in person.
Yeah. Well, I listened to your interviews with, I'm trying to remember the names of
with Karen
the two.
and Kaylee.
Yes. Karen Rice and Kaylee, and, God, I was so excited. I was actually on the bike this morning, just kind of doing an easy session, and I was watching Kaylee, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be out there.
She has so much energy, right?
Yeah.
And I have one more coming too, Kathy Casey, who she did Kona as well. And she's been racing for, 20 plus years, and she qualified. And it's kind of a crazy story. It was like, it involved a margarita Friday night, and her texting me at like 9:00 at that night saying, should I do Ironman Texas? And I was like, go for it. And that's how it all kind of came together. It's pretty wild, but it's a good podcast. You'll have to listen to it once it's out.
Okay. I definitely will.
But yeah, good luck to you, Mike. And thanks so much for the time, and we appreciate it. You've got so much energy and positivity, and I love that about you. And we really appreciate your loyalty to D3 over so many years. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you guys. You've made a huge difference in my life, and as long as you're around, I'm going to be an athlete for D3.
Oh, thanks, Mike. We really appreciate that. We'd love to have you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Trust the Process. If you have a question on anything related to triathlon, please send me an email at mike@d3multisport.com. We'd love to hear from you. Make it a great day.